The dawn was quiet when Captain Ethan Cole stepped out of the small silver shuttle and looked up at the shining towers of Orion Palace. The air smelled new, as if the whole world had been washed clean for the great day. He had been sent by Earth as a guest to attend a royal wedding, the most important event of the year. Everyone said it would bring peace between worlds and end many old fears. Ethan did not know much about royal customs, only that he needed to be polite, smile at the right moments, and try not to touch anything too expensive. He adjusted the collar of his simple, formal uniform. It was blue and gray, made from light cloth that caught the sunlight, and it made him look proud without trying too hard. He was a soldier, not a diplomat. The idea of sitting among nobles and listening to stories about fine art made him itch for a weapon he was not allowed to carry here. Still, he reminded himself this was a mission of peace, not war. Guards led him through long white corridors filled with glowing light. The walls were smooth as glass, and voices echoed softly across the halls. The people he passed looked human in form, yet their calm expressions and graceful movements made them seem touched by something strange. Their clothes shimmered like liquid gold or blue ice. Ethan nodded to each one, though most only looked at him with polite curiosity. When he entered the great hall, he stopped without meaning to. The room stretched wide and high, its roof lined with 1,000 tiny lights like stars caught indoors. At the center stood a raised platform where 2 golden chairs waited. Music played, soft and clear, as if sung by wind instead of instruments. Guests filled the seats, their faces turned toward the front, where the bride would soon appear. A woman walked past him wearing a crown of silver leaves. She looked strong and kind, with calm brown eyes. This was Queen Marielle, ruler of the Dominion, though to Ethan, she looked more like a mother, proud of her daughter's big day. The young woman standing beside her must have been the Princess Lyra, as people whispered her name. She wore a long dress the color of morning clouds, and her dark hair fell like silk over her shoulders. Her smile was quiet but sure. When she looked at him, Ethan felt the odd sense that she had seen him before, though they had never met. He took the seat they had saved for Earth's guest of honor, suspected someone had made a mistake, placing him so close to the front. From here he could see the Queen's chair, the musicians, and the delicate wedding symbols laid on a marble table, a silver sword, a small golden branch, and a simple band of gold. He thought they were decorations meant for the ceremony, pretty old objects that had no meaning to him. A tall man in bright robes came forward and spoke in a clear voice that filled the hall. He gave a long speech about peace and unity, about the joining of 2 great nations that would now share one heart. Ethan listened quietly, though the formal words blurred into a gentle hum in his tired head. He had not slept well since arriving. The palace light never really faded, and his body still waited for Earth's night. The man called for the honorary guest from Earth to step forward. Ethan blinked. Your words seemed to aim at someone else, but no one stood up. Before he could stop himself, he rose. Guards guided him to the front, their movements smooth like dancers carrying a secret. They asked him to hold the sword while the reading continued, saying it was tradition. Ethan took the sword carefully, feeling its cool weight settle into his palm. The blade caught the light, reflecting small sparks around the hall. Tried to look serious, pretending he understood what was happening. The speech went on, talking of oaths, courage, and eternal friendship. When the voice finally stopped, the Queen gave a signal that made every person bow their head. Ethan followed, lowering his gaze. When he looked up again, the air seemed to tremble. Queen Marielle smiled, and Princess Lyra stepped forward. The music changed into a slow, rising melody that made every sound in the room fall quiet. The princess looked straight at Ethan, her eyes wide, her hands slightly raised. A light mist moved through the air, glowing around them. Someone in the crowd began to cheer softly. Ethan turned his head, searching for the groom. He expected a tall nobleman to appear, ready to take the bride's hand. But no one came. The guards still stood behind him, serious as stones. The Queen nodded once more. Ethan caught a flicker of surprise or amusement in her face, but not enough for him to understand why. The man in robes read one last line that sounded like both a promise and a command. The crowd rose, then clapped, a sound like steady rain in the grand hall. The music soared. Flowers fell from high windows, drifting through the air. Telelights flashed. People smiled. Ethan smiled too, though confusion burned behind his calm face. He leaned closer to one of the guards and whispered, "I think you have the wrong man." The guard only bowed and said softly, "No, Captain. The ceremony is sealed." Ethan stood there, sword in hand, as realization crept slowly through him. He had come to witness a royal wedding, but the truth settled with the chill certainty of starlight. He was the one who had just been married. Ethan stood frozen on the shining floor while the sound of cheers faded into soft music. He still held the sword, the heavy thing cold against his hand. The queen smiled as if everything had happened exactly as she planned. Her daughter, Princess Lyra, glanced at him quickly, then lowered her eyes. The moment had a strange sweetness and great confusion tangled together. The guests began talking again, their voices flowing like a low river of words. Some laughed, some bowed, some gave good wishes that sounded like songs. Ethan tried to find a path to the exit, but two guards stood close enough to keep him in place without touching him. When the ceremony ended, the queen stood and spoke with the calm power of someone used to being obeyed. "Peace has been written in new vows," she said. Her words fell gently, but no one missed the weight inside them. "Our worlds are now joined through unity and trust. Captain Ethan Cole, brave son of Earth, now stands beside my daughter, Princess Lyra. Let every witness remember this day." The hall filled with thunderous applause again, though Ethan's heart sank. He had not agreed to this, at least not knowingly. Tried to speak but only managed one quiet word. Wait, no one listened. He turned to Lyra, hoping to see doubt or protest in her face, but she looked calm, almost sad. When the guests started to move toward the feast room, she stepped closer and spoke in a low voice, meant only for him. "I did not know they would bind you," she said. "It was supposed to be symbolic, only a gesture of trust." "I am sorry." Ethan blinked at her. "Then what happens now?" Lyra's smile trembled into something fragile. "Now they call you my husband?" He nearly laughed out loud because it was too absurd to believe, yet the golden band on the marble table was no symbol. A servant came to slip it onto his finger, bowing deeply, as if presenting a gift to a king. The feast that followed looked like a dream painted in gold. Long tables shone with fruit and rich food from many worlds. Light poured through tall glass walls, and the hum of soft instruments filled the air. Everyone seemed in celebration except Ethan, who moved stiffly, nodding to each noble who offered greetings. Words like blessed union and new dawn floated around him, sounding both kind and false. Princess Lyra walked beside him through the rows of guests. Her poise never broke, but he could read quiet trouble in her eyes. She guided him to a smaller balcony overlooking a garden glowing with gentle light. The night sky stretched beyond, calm and endless. "Do you believe in fate?" she asked softly. "I believe in orders and in mistakes," he said. "And I think this is both." Lyra looked out toward the garden. "Maybe so, but perhaps a good mistake. My mother's counselor saw a chance to end old fears. You carry honor from Earth. I carry duty from this realm. Combined, they think we can make peace real." He shook his head, still trying to untangle his thoughts. "But marriage? They could have signed a treaty. They believe old vows hold stronger power," she said quietly. "A promise made with heart lasts longer than any paper." Ethan rubbed his forehead, trying to push the confusion away. He watched Lyra's calm, steady face, and noticed the strength behind her grace. She was not just a royal figure in pretty clothes. She looked like someone who had been trained since childhood to carry an entire world's hope. Despite everything, he began to respect her. Her honesty warmed the sharp corners inside him. She did not want to trick him, nor did she enjoy the surprise. She simply lived inside a system older than both of them. When they returned to the hall, the queen met them with proud eyes. Servants lifted goblets for a toast. "To the unity of hearts," the queen declared. Ethan raised his glass because not doing so would insult everyone present. The gold liquid sparkled in the light, sweet yet strong when he tasted it. After the feast, he was escorted to a quiet guest chamber, lined with blue silk curtains. The guards left, and the doors shut gently behind him. For the first time that night, he was alone. He sat by the window, looking at the city beyond. Soft lights formed rivers between high towers, and small flying crafts moved like silver fish in the sky. Everything looked peaceful, and yet he could not rest. His reflection in the window showed a man with a band of gold around his finger, his expression both serious and lost. A small knock came at the door, turned, and there stood Lyra again. She had changed into a simple gown, her crown removed, her hair loose around her shoulders. Without her royal armor of ceremony, she looked younger, almost shy. "I had to see if you are well," she said. Ethan smiled faintly. "I am many things, but well might not be the right word." She moved closer to the window and gazed outside beside him. "You may think this is a prison made of smiles," she said, "but I think it may also be a new road. We can change more together than they planned." He looked at her and saw the spark of challenge in her quiet face. He laughed softly, the first real sound of humor all day. "I suppose every good story begins with someone who doesn't know what he's doing." Lyra turned toward him and smiled fully this time. "Then our story has begun perfectly." The silence that followed was gentle, not heavy. Outside, the stars shone brighter, and among them, Earth waited far away, unaware that its soldier had become the most unexpected husband in the universe. The next morning began with soft sunlight that slipped through the pale curtains and touched Ethan's face. He opened his eyes slowly, unsure for a moment if yesterday's madness had been real. Then he saw the golden band on his finger, and the truth returned like a wave. He sat up with a sigh. Somewhere in this shining city, people believed he was a royal husband. He was still just a soldier who had stumbled into the wrong ceremony. A quiet knock came at the door. When it opened, a young servant entered carrying a tray with fruit and light bread. The servant bowed low and said that the queen wanted to see him at once. Ethan cleaned up quickly, put on the finest uniform they had given him, and followed the guards through echoing halls toward the great council chamber. The queen sat beside a wide table made of clear glass. Maps of stars floated above it in gentle light. Around her stood counselors dressed in layers of white and silver. Each of them turned to watch as Ethan entered. The silence was heavy for a moment. Then the queen smiled, the kind of smile that could calm storms if she wished. "Captain Ethan Cole," she said in her calm, even voice. "Yesterday you joined our family through a vow as old as our history. You have given my daughter your honor, and through this union, our worlds now share a path. You must understand that people already sing of your name. They see you as a symbol of hope." Ethan gave a small nod. "Your Majesty, I am honored. But I am not sure I can live up to the stories people will tell." "You already have," she said. "But more will be asked of you." Then she turned to her counselors and spoke about unrest in some far provinces. Certain groups believed the marriage weakened them, not strengthened them. There were whispers of rebellion, ships being armed in secret. Ethan listened carefully, realizing that peace was not as solid as the bright walls around them. When the council ended, the queen asked to speak with him alone. "My daughter sees something in you," she said softly. "She believes you will help her lead with strength and kindness both. Do not let fear of the unknown hold you back." Ethan bowed slightly. "I will do my best, Your Majesty." He found Lyra standing in the garden beyond the chamber, sunlight touching her hair like thin gold threads. She smiled when he came closer, though her eyes looked tired. "They have begun to see you as a hero," she said. I hope that does not trouble you." He laughed quietly. "I can handle being called many things. But hero, I am not so sure." She looked down at the golden ring around his finger. "Maybe neither of us planned this, but perhaps we can give it meaning." They began to walk slowly through the garden. Birds with silver feathers sang from bright trees. Fountains whispered beside stone paths. Lyra spoke about her people's hopes, their fears, and how fragile peace could be. Ethan listened, asking questions, offering thoughts he never imagined he would need. Together they shared honest words, both nervous but curious. Later that day, Lyra insisted he see the Defense Command Center. The wide room glittered with screens and charts that showed ships moving across the sky. A few officers saluted him, proud to meet the human who had become part of their royal family. Ethan felt uncomfortable with their polite attention, but also strangely useful again. It was a place built on clear rules and action. He began studying the patrol routes, spotting gaps and risks with a soldier's eye. Lyra watched quietly while he spoke to the commanders, suggesting ways to guard the trade lines and settle disputes without fighting. She realized that his training could help more than any noble speech. By evening, the two of them shared dinner in a small balcony hall. Candles stood beside the plates, their warm flames moving in the breeze. Lyra asked him about Earth. He described the wide oceans, the noisy cities, and the cold mountain air. She listened like a child hearing a bedtime story. "In your world," she asked, "do people marry for peace?" He smiled faintly. "Sometimes they marry for love, and sometimes for reason, but mostly for the hope that tomorrow will be better." She nodded slowly. "Then we are not so different." They finished their meal quietly. The palace lights dimmed as night settled across the towers. From far below, music floated up from the streets where citizens celebrated the royal union. Ethan leaned on the railing and looked at the stars above. "I never wanted to be anyone's prince," he said at last. "But if being tied to you helps stop a war, I will not fight fate." Lyra stood close beside him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Perhaps fate chose well this time." Neither of them said more. They watched the endless sky together until the music faded and the city fell to calm. For the first time, Ethan felt he might belong here not as a stranger or an accident, but as a part of something larger. He still did not fully understand what being a husband to a princess meant. But he knew that his heart had shifted quietly, moving toward a new kind of duty, one bound not by orders but by choice. The city awoke to quiet tension. Rumors had begun to move faster than the light trains that circled the palace. Some people called the marriage a miracle, and others called it a mistake. Captain Ethan Cole did not need to hear the whispers to know something was wrong. The air itself felt heavier. Messages arrived every hour, carrying warnings from border settlements where small attacks had already started. Ethan stood by the wide window of the command hall, watching the sky darken with gray clouds. Princess Lyra entered the room, wrapped in a long coat of pale blue. Her face was calm, but her eyes betrayed sleepless nights. "They are frightened," she said quietly. "Change always brings fear. Some believe I traded our freedom for safety. Others say Earth will use this union to rule us." Ethan turned toward her. "And what do you believe?" She looked out through the glass wall. "I believe it will take both of us to show them peace means strength, not weakness." Later that morning, the Queen held a meeting with her top advisors. The voices around the long table clashed like metal. Some wished to send soldiers to crush the unrest before it grew. Others begged for patience and peace missions. Ethan watched, his hands clasped behind him, as Lyra listened in silence. Finally, when the noise became too much, she stood and spoke with a clear tone that silenced everyone. "We promised unity. If we break that promise, the day after we made it, our vows will become empty words. We must protect the people, yes, but not by ruling them through fear." Ethan saw the pride in the Queen's eyes. He saw doubt too, because keeping peace often demanded more courage than winning war. When the council ended, Ethan walked beside Lyra through the quiet palace gardens. The air smelled of rain. "They won't all follow peace," he said. "You know that." "Yes," she replied softly. "But they will follow hope if they can still see it." She stopped beside a tree with white flowers falling across the path. Her voice lowered. "You come from a world that has survived many wars. How did your people learn to stop fighting?" Ethan thought for a moment before he answered. "We never fully stopped. But we learned that peace needs action just as war does. Sometimes we build instead of destroy. Sometimes we speak when we would rather strike." She smiled a little. "You make it sound simple?" "It's never simple," he said. "But people make it real if they're brave enough to trust one another." That evening, a messenger arrived, breathless with news. A rebel fleet had seized a supply station beyond the orbit line. It was a small loss, yet a dangerous sign. Ethan joined the military council again. The commanders argued in hurried voices. Before anyone could make a plan, Lyra stepped forward and said, "We will not wait for them to come to us." Ethan's gaze met hers in surprise. "You mean to go yourself?" She nodded. "If the people see us together out there, they will know our alliance is real, not just words written in ceremony." The Queen hesitated, but after a long pause she agreed. Only a few would travel with them on a fast ship, the Royal Guard, Lyra, and her unexpected husband, the soldier from Earth. The ship lifted from the palace platform under a cold moon. The engines hummed softly, steady like a heart. Inside, Ethan checked the defense controls, while Lyra studied the flight maps. The journey was quiet, except for their breathing and the low hum of power. Far below, the planet's lights looked like a scattered chain of gold. When they reached the edge of the rebellion zone, the sensors showed a few damaged craft drifting around the station. No heavy battle yet, but the threat waited close. Ethan took the speaker and called for a truce line, offering help to the injured instead of revenge. His voice carried honest weight. Perhaps that was why the rebels answered. A leader appeared on the comm screen, his face lined with fear and anger. He demanded proof that the royal couple truly fought for peace. Lyra stepped beside Ethan and gave her own message. "Ow, you do not have to believe in my crown," she said. "Believe in the lives of those who stand behind you. If one side falls, all of us lose the same sky." Her words were simple, yet silence followed them. Then the rebel lowered his weapon. The battle that had seemed ready to explode ended instead with quiet negotiation. When the ship returned to the palace, crowds filled the landing field. They cheered for the princess and the soldier whose hands had guided them away from war. Ethan tried to stay still and unnoticed, but Lyra took his hand and raised it high before everyone. "This man did not come here to rule," she said. "He came to remind us that peace is built by those who dare to trust." The cheers grew louder, echoing through the cold air. That night, under the glow of city lights, Ethan stood on the balcony beside her again. "You gave them hope," he said. "And you gave them proof," she answered. He looked at her, the soft breeze moving her hair against her face. For the first time since he arrived, the weight in his chest felt lighter. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew that this strange bond had begun to mean more than any treaty could. Far above them, the stars burned steady. Peace, fragile as glass, yet real enough to touch, had taken its first breath. The days that followed felt brighter across the great city. The rebellion had ended before it could grow strong, and people began to believe in peace again. The name of Captain Ethan Cole was now spoken with warmth and respect. Children played in the palace gardens, pretending to be the brave soldier from Earth who had saved their skies. Ethan did not feel like a hero. He still thought of himself as a man who had been caught in an accident of destiny. Yet the calm smiles of the people touched something deep inside him. The Queen called for a great celebration to mark the new age of peace. Work returned to the streets. Music filled the night markets, and the palace towers glowed with golden fire. Flags waved in every direction. Lyra moved through it all with quiet grace, shaking hands and giving kind words. She spoke often about shared strength, not royal power. The people listened to her because her words sounded true, not forced. Ethan followed beside her during processions, his presence reminding everyone that this was not a union of command, but of trust. One morning he walked alone to the outer walls of the Sky Fortress. The air was cool and fresh. Looking out at the wide land, he remembered the first day he arrived here, nervous and lost among strangers. So much had changed since then. He had learned their ways, their language, and their quiet formality. But more than that, he had learned about himself. He could fight without weapons, win without war, and speak truths that carried weight. As he stood watching the sunrise, Lyra joined him. She wore no crown that day, just a simple dress of soft silver. She looked more like the woman from the balcony than the princess from the throne. "I thought I might find you here," she said. He smiled. "It seems I like quiet mornings." "I remember when you said you only understood orders and mistakes," she said warmly. "You have come far since then." He laughed softly. "And to think, I only came to attend your wedding." Her smile widened into laughter, ended up staying for the rest of it. They stood side by side in silence for a long moment. The light touched the towers and painted the palace gold. Lyra turned toward him and said, "I think my mother plans to step down sooner than anyone expected. She wants us to rule together." Ethan's eyes widened. "Rule? You mean as king and queen?" She nodded slowly. "It will not be easy. The council still argues. But they trust you now. You have shown them that peace has strength." He watched the rising sun again, his heart calm but heavy with the weight of responsibility. "I never dreamed I would become what they now see. I only wanted to serve with honor. And you have," she said. "This world needs someone who remembers where he came from. Maybe that is why fate placed you here." The coronation was held at twilight several weeks later. Great hall shone with thousands of candles. People came from all across the realm. When Ethan stepped forward, the crowd fell silent. The queen placed a silver circlet upon his head, then another upon her daughter's. For a brief moment, he felt the weight of every hope in the room pressing down on his shoulders. Lyra slipped her hand into his, and the burden grew lighter. Together they faced the crowd as cheers rolled through the hall like distant thunder. That night, when the music faded and the guests began to leave, Ethan and Lyra slipped away to the balcony that had once been their secret place. Below them, lanterns floated across the sky, carrying light into the distance. The air was peaceful and cool. "This world feels different now," Lyra said quietly. "It is because they have faith again," Ethan answered. "Sometimes all people need is to believe life can be better." She turned toward him, her voice soft enough to vanish into the wind. "You were never just a visitor, Ethan. You changed us." He smiled, eyes still fixed on the lights drifting into the night. "You changed me first." They stood there together, neither needing to speak more. Above them, stars shimmered like faraway fires. The same stars that watched over Earth. Ethan thought about his old home and wondered what stories they were telling there now. Perhaps they imagined him gone forever. Perhaps one day they would know that their soldier had become the builder of peace. Before dawn, the queen visited them quietly. Her steps were slow, but steady. "My work is done," she told them. "The rest belongs to you." She smiled with pride that glowed brighter than the lamps of the city, then left them alone again under the open sky. As the new rulers of two worlds, Ethan and Lyra promised to keep peace, living no matter how many storms rose ahead. They would build schools and gardens, ships and bridges. They would show that strength and kindness could grow together without fear. When morning came, the first ships of trade left the harbor filled with gifts from Earth and distant cities. Bells rang through the air, not warning of attack but singing of unity. Ethan watched them from the highest tower. Lyra stood nearby, sunlight touching her hair, and for a moment everything felt still, the sky, the wind, the years behind and ahead. He smiled quietly and said to her, "I came as a guest, but fate had other plans." She answered, "Fate only opens the door. The rest is what we choose to walk through." They stood watching the ships grow smaller, until they disappeared into the horizon. And there, on that soft morning filled with new light, the human warrior who had come to watch a wedding finally understood he had not only found peace for worlds, but also a home for his heart.